Hi, this is Mr. C with the video tutorial on public opinion and public opinion polling. Public opinion is the collected opinions, attitudes, beliefs of the public at large as they relate to politics and government and current events. It is not an exaggeration to say that our democracy is based on how our representatives and how the people we elect respond to public opinion. Politicians try to respond to it. They also try to shape it. They find out what the public opinion is through polling, and they change their language, change the way they frame issues. What they don't do is change mostly their core beliefs. A myth is politicians look at polls and then immediately go 180 degrees and change. They don't do that. Polls are the lifeblood of American politics, and public opinion is public opinion polling is the lifeblood of a lot of journalism. So an event takes place like the shutdown. The media reports on the event. People watch it. People listen to it. People look at it. People read it in the paper. People listen to it on the radio. And then an individual will respond to it based on what they believe, their preconceived political notions or beliefs about anything. Talk about it amongst their friends, form opinions, and then polls will measure those opinions. And that's how public opinion is essentially formed. It's the reaction to events. Public opinion polling is done for the most part very scientifically, and that science is based on a random sample. There are over 400 million Americans. You don't ask everybody, right? You don't ask everybody what they think. You take a random sample. For the accuracy of a public opinion poll, you need a random sample of a decent size, but it does not have to be a particularly large size. The ideal size for a random sample got to be between about 1,000 and 2,000 people, ideally. If you have too small a sample size, that increases the poll's margin of error. And a margin of error is the measure of a poll's reliability and accuracy. The ideal margin of error for a reliable poll is plus or minus 3%. The higher the margin of error, the less accurate the poll. So, plus or minus 3% means if they say 55% of Americans, that can either be 58 or that can be 52, depending on, plus or minus, depending on the accuracy. Plus or minus 3% is accurate for a poll. Plus or minus 8%, generally not accurate. You also need a random sample. 1,000 men between the ages of 18 and 30 is not a random sample. That doesn't reflect the population. And the question needs to be clearly worded, neutral and unbiased language. So let's take a look at a public opinion poll. Here's one. The Wall Street Journal does a poll. They had 800 adults nationwide. That's less than 1,000. So notice the margin of error is plus or minus 3.5%. But look at the question. Thinking about President Obama and Republicans in Congress and their negotiations about the budget, does it make you feel more confident or less confident about the economy getting better, or does it not make a difference in your opinion? 7% of the people said more confident, 63% of the people said less confident, 28% of the people said no difference, and 2% unsure. That type of question is probably a standard question. Do you more confident, less confident? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Or undecided? Lots of multiple choice type stuff. One of the most common type of polls is a tracking poll. A tracking poll is a poll that is done on a regular basis to kind of keep track of public opinion on a specific issue. And the presidential approval rating is probably the most typical or famous type of tracking poll. So take a look at this this tracking poll. Gallup is probably the most famous polling company. They polled 1,500 adults nationwide, margin of error plus or minus 3%, a pretty good poll. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Barack Obama is handling his job as president? Neutral. Neutral question. Do you approve? Do you disapprove? Check out these numbers. This poll, October 8th to the 10th. This poll, October 7th. Look how often they do it, and look at the fluctuation or lack thereof. I like to kind of look month to month on these tracking polls. See where it was in September, see where it was in August, and you can actually see how it fluctuates, particularly based on things like the government shutdown or issues that happen. So 1,500 adults, neutral question. You want to make this question absolutely useless? Do you approve or disapprove of the lousy job Barack Obama is doing? Do you approve or disapprove of the job that the Democrat or the Barack Obama is doing? Anything that can kind of give people a bias or a preconceived notion is what you do not want in a public opinion poll. How you frame the question, confusing questions. Do you believe that waterboarding is torture and that the U.S. has a moral responsibility to not engage in or condone? Too long, it's asking you two different things. If you ask about an issue like abortion in an oversimplified manner, especially when a lot of people have very nuanced views about something like that, and then bias. Should the Obama administration step back from the rush to create cap-and-trade energy legislation that will cost jobs, harm future economic growth, and impose it? That's bias. That is pushing somebody to a particular conclusion, which you don't want to do. You want to measure public opinion in a reliable poll. You don't want to create it. Another problem with polling is that polls show that Americans don't really know a lot about politics and government. Our knowledge of current events politics is decreasing. That makes it harder for polls, right? A lack of knowledge might affect polling results. Recently, there was a great a poll done where people were asked if they approved Obamacare or if they approved of the Affordable Care Act, which they preferred. They're the same thing. It's the same exact thing. The Affordable Care Act is the name of the law. Obamacare is the name that the media and many opponents have given it. So that would affect the outcome of a poll. Very few people will say, I don't know. If they do say, I don't know, that's probably is more accurate than guessing. But most people, a lot of people find that they tend to guess, so they tend to say, "Well, I'm unsure," or "I think that this is." I'll pick one. I love this particular chart. Gallup did this poll and found that 67% knew who gave the Gettysburg Address, 92% knew who was the first President of the United States. Only 17% of Americans could name the current Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. These polls are quite interesting and show a lot of what I've seen too through the years, that a lot of people just don't know these things. What types of polls do we have? The most common poll, and the poll we'll be looking at in great detail, is a tracking poll. Daily polls that help a campaign or a public official keep track of their daily rise and fall of support. An exit poll is a poll that's conducted by media as voters leave the voting booth on election day. This is one of the few polls that is done in person, and it's used quite extensively to predict the outcome of an election. They are generally considered reliable, although they have, in some cases, most notably the 2000 presidential election in Florida, shown to be a little bit less than reliable. But for the most part, exit polls are used quite often. They're controversial because a lot of people, a lot of the media will publish East Coast and West Coast exit polls, or announce those exit polls before polls, East Coast or Midwest polls, before the West Coast has closed. And a lot of people will say, oh, my guy's losing, I'm not going to go vote. A push poll is not a poll that is designed to measure public opinion. A push poll is a poll full of biased questions. It is designed to sway public opinion as opposed to measuring it. A push poll would have questions like, do you believe that George Bush or John McCain should be the Republican nominee for president, even though John McCain has an illegitimate child? An actual example. Did you know that Pat Robertson does not believe John McCain will make a good president? Pat Robertson was an evangelical minister who was very popular in the 80s and 90s. Do you know that? Therefore, who will you vote for? Push polls are used mostly in elections and mostly to sway undecided voters or biased voters in a primary or something like that. We are going to focus on measuring public opinion, so tracking polls are what we're going to take a look at. But push polls, you'll need to understand just to know that they are biased and that they're used as a tool to motivate people in public opinion. So that's the introduction of public opinion. Again, these notes can be found in your Red Book. Some of the handouts can be found in the Red Book. We will be looking at public opinion polls this week in great detail and talking about them.